brought word that San Francisco was destroyed by earthquake. February 22, 1908, at Bemis's fixed sewing machine. This sewing machine head at the Idaho State Historical Museum in Boise came from Polly Bemis's first cabin. Besides sewing, Polly enjoyed crocheting and other kinds of needlework. Examples of both are at the Historical Museum at St. Gertrude in Cottonwood and in her restored home. April 4, 1908, got bucket eggs from Polly. June 23, 1908, down to river at Bemis's all night, had strawberries, paid Polly $5.50 for eggs and dried fruit. Although Charlie Bemis didn't have an income, Polly had some money saved from when she worked in Warren, and she made money from selling fruit, vegetables, and eggs. February 6, 1910, took picture of Polly and Nellie and Julie, and Nellie and Julie were the horses. In 1910, Shep purchased the ranch at the mouth of Crooked Creek, and he and Peter Klinkhammer, his mining partner, began living there. They and the Bemises often visited back and forth. August 17, 1910, Polly and Bemis over to dinner. Polly caught 27 fish. In later years, Pete Klinkhammer commented, Polly loved to fish and was good at it. We'd see her gardening, and she'd bend to the earth real quick, then shove something into the big pocket of her long dress. Come 3 o'clock every day, Polly had her gardening done and her fish bait ready and waiting in her pocket. We used to know what time it was by watching her. August 17, 1910, Bear been eating Bemis's apples. Had watermelon at Bemis's. Fine day. July 18, 1911. Pete back this afternoon. Got capped for Polly. Occasionally, there's unintended humor in the diaries. One sequence starts on January 7, 1912. Put George in chicken house. On January 8, Shep killed George. He weighed 4 pounds. Then on Sunday, January 21st, Shep wrote, Bemis and Polly over to dinner, cooked George with noodles. November 6, 1912. I came home, brought down shoes for Polly, and these shoes were found in the cabin after she died. Earlier, on April 29, 1912, Shep wrote, mail from Nellie, his sister. First heard of the loss of the Titanic by hitting an iceberg. August 14, 1914. Pete back this evening, got phonograph and records. And this is a list of some of Shep's records. Pete Klinkhammer recalled that one record concerned a Chinese laundryman, and Uncle Josh's troubles invariably made Polly chuckle. September 6, 1915. Over river this evening, sent to Montgomery Ward for shoes for Polly and got her order for grub. August 11, 1919. Over river, fixed telephone. Shep had installed a battery-operated telephone between their two places and later ran the line on his side up over the mountain to town. September 6, 1919. Boat down with 9 men. They stopped here tonight. Captain Harry Gulicki, shown here, piloted the boat. Passenger Will Shoup said, another interesting character was Charles Bemis, who has lived with a Chinese wife on a little 4-acre patch of land on Polly Creek for the past 25 years, meaning since 1894. He is getting too old to work, and Polly, the wife, does it all. On Polly's birthday, September 11, 1920, Shep wrote, over river to dinner, Polly 67 years old, China Sam at Bemis's tonight. Fine day. Subtracting 67 from 1920 gives 1853 as the year of Polly's birth again. The Caucasians called this man China Sam, but his real name was Jung Chu. He ran a bathhouse in Warren and was one of Polly's friends when she lived there. On July 21, 1921, Shep wrote, boat down this evening. On this trip, again captained by Harry Gulicki, one of the passengers was Sissy Patterson, also known as Countess Eleanor Geisica. In 1923, an account of her visit with Polly Bemis appeared in the magazine Field and Stream, and it's the first known interview with Polly. The Countess wrote, Polly stands not much over 4 feet, neat as a pin, wrinkled as a walnut, and at 67 she is full of dash and charm. Polly told the Countess, "I cost $2,500. Don't look it now, and chuckled. The Countess asked Polly where Mr. Bemis was, and she said, "Abed. He been abed most 2 year now." When Polly indicated that Charlie was pretty cross and implied that she had to wait on him a lot, the Countess suggested that maybe Polly should get another husband. Hee, she laughed. "Yes, I think so too." With Charlie Bemis bedridden, Charlie Shep and Pete Klinkhammer increasingly took over many of the Bemis' chores. During 1921, for example, Shep records that they crossed the river many times to cut wood for the Bemises, put out a stovepipe fire, plow and plant their garden, burn brush, cut hay, and do the watering. Captain Gulicki's trips almost always stopped so his passengers could visit with Polly and take photos. This is the July 1922 R.E. Shepherd party from Twin Falls. Captain Gulicki is on the left and Polly, then 68 years old, is in front. One of the men on the trip kept a diary. His entry for Wednesday, July 19, 1922 reads, quote, "About 5 p.m. we stopped at Polly Bemis's place. Bemis is an old-timer here, probably 75 years old and confined to his bed. His wife, Polly, is a Chinese woman. She looks after him and tends to the garden, orchard, and farming operations. Polly has been in the Salmon River country for more than 40 years and has never been off the ranch for 28 years, end quote. Then less than a month later, on August 16, 1922, with Pete away taking produce to Dixie, Shep wrote that the Bemis' house burned at 12 noon. Had a hell of a time. Got the old man out by the skin of my teeth. Lost Teddy, that was Polly's dog. He got burned. Polly and I got the old man over the river about 4. Had hard time. Didn't save a single thing. The whole place was on fire when I got over." In a 1924 interview, Polly said that she lost one of her most cherished possessions, a blue silk dress about 35 years old with rows of buttons made by her husband from $2.50 and $5 gold pieces. The silk was sent into the camp from San Francisco and was lined with flour sacks from Grangeville. Although the dress burned, Polly recovered the buttons. On October 29, Charlie Bemis died. Shep wrote in the margin, "Bemis dead," and underlined it for emphasis. Bemis passed in at 3 a.m. Up to camp, that was a mining camp up in the mountains, left at 5 a.m. Gus and Holmes down. We buried the old man right after dinner. Fine day. This is Charlie Bemis' grave at the Shep Ranch. Since Polly surely helped choose his final resting place, it is not surprising to find that it is in a nearly ideal setting with respect to the Chinese principles of feng shui. There, the ideal location for a grave is in the center of a south-facing slope overlooking a body of water, preferably a meandering stream or river. A curving south-facing hillside embraces Charlie Bemis' grave, which would still face the river if modern buildings did not intervene. On October 31st, Shep wrote, "Polly going to Warren." She went up with Pete the next day and would live there for nearly 2 years. While she was there, Shep wrote to her occasionally. Although Polly could not read or write, she had many friends in Warren who surely read the letters to her and who probably wrote down replies that she dictated. Pete Klinkhammer later said, "Bemis started to teach her to read once, but she got along too well and he quit. It wouldn't have taken her very long if he had been willing to put out the effort." In July 1923, Charlie Shep's sister Nellie and brother Harvey came for a long visit. When they left in August, they went back through Warren. There, a car took them and Polly to Grangeville. Nellie and Polly had their photograph taken on the old Whitebird grade. In Grangeville, the Idaho County Free Press interviewed Polly. Described as a little old gray-haired woman weighing less than 100 pounds, Polly wore boys' shoes on her tiny feet, bound in childhood, and wore a plain cotton dress. Polly had many callers during the week at the home of Mrs. Anson Holmes, where she is a guest. She came here from Warren by automobile in order to be fitted with glasses, and she also had some dental work done. Polly took her first automobile ride and saw her first train, but her first motion picture fascinated her the most. After a week in Grangeville, Polly returned to Warren on the Salmon River stage. "I have best time in 50 years, she exclaimed. "Maybe I come back next year." Bedecked in a new dress, a gay hat, and white shoes, Polly was particularly proud of her new gold-rimmed spectacles. Shep and Klinkhammer agreed to build Polly a new house and look after her, and in exchange they would get the ranch on her death. Between October 1923 and May 1924, Shep often wrote about sewing the house logs, putting them up, cutting shakes for the roof, putting in a new telephone, installing flooring, and constructing windows. In the meantime, Polly kept busy in Warren. She was always very fond of children and reportedly knew the name of every child born in Warren and the date of its birth. Johnny Carey was a very special young friend. He grew up to write several books, one of which was River of No Return with Court Conley. Johnny, his parents, Tom and Jeannie, and his two sisters, Gay and Mary, lived on the South Fork of the Salmon River. In order to go to school, the children had to live in Warren, away from home. Johnny stayed at a hotel, but when his next younger sister, Gay, started school, she lived with Polly that term. Johnny helped Polly with chores, such as bringing in wood. In August 1924, Polly visited Boise. She went with Jay Sizik and his wife, and they stayed at the Idaho Hotel. Sizik eat in my boarding house 32 years ago. I know him long time, she said. In Boise, Polly saw her first streetcar, her first high building, her second movie show, and rode in her first elevator all in one day. A reporter interviewed her at the Idaho. Polly, at 70, was then a tiny woman with iron gray hair, the brightest of eyes, dressed in a blue cotton dress, her whole appearance scrupulously neat. Her speech is excellent, with just enough of the pidgin English to make it fascinating. Her memory is remarkable, particularly for dates, and her eyes twinkle as she tells jokes on herself. After Polly returned to Warren, construction activities increased on her Salmon River house. By September 1924, Charlie Shep was over there nearly every day working on it. On October 8th, Pete went to Warren, and on the 9th, he came back with Polly. She stayed with them across the river for just over a week until they finished and finally moved in on Friday, October 17, 1924. This is the interior of her restored cabin, but only a few of the things were actually hers. Charlie Shep built a bed for Polly as well as a table and chairs, and Pete cut firewood for her. As she became older, Shep and Klinkhammer did more and more of the heavy work. Polly still kept very busy. In one 2-week period during 1926, she killed 4 porcupines. We'll just have to imagine how she did it, since the diary doesn't detail her method. Despite being unable to read or write, Polly sometimes got mail. It waited at the nearest post office for Pete Klinkhammer to collect when he took produce into town to sell. In later years, a friend asked Pete if Polly could read. Pete replied, "Could Polly read? Money and 15 too. She was a sharp gambler in a cribbage game and used to pit her wits against the best of them. 2 fellows once came and camped across Crooked Creek and did some placer mining over there. One of them liked to make a big show. He used to get vegetables and a few little things from Polly. She never charged for the stuff, but he kept flashing this $100 bill to show off, I think. Well, Polly let it pass a few times. Then one day she got tired of this and she surprised him. 2 things Polly could do good: count money and 15 too. She changed it for him. After that, he didn't flash no more money." Then on Friday, August 4th, 1933, Shep went across the river in the morning and found Polly laying outside. She is bughouse, meaning insane and nearly helpless. 2 days later, Pete and a friend took her halfway out on horseback, where they met a car sent from Grangeville to get her. The following Friday, Shep learned that Polly was getting along fine. She probably had had a stroke. Through all the Shep diaries, in the newspaper stories, and in the interviews with Polly herself, there is absolutely no mention of Polly being won in a poker game. One of the first published references to it occurred in 1933 when she was at the Grangeville Hospital. A newspaper account